You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
"45 minutes past the hour here on Periscope Uncensored on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Alabama. I'm your host, Clarissa Jax. Jax is not with us right now, but we're hoping he'll join us soon. You gotta love those technical difficulties. They always seem to happen on show nights. Never fails. But we are still talking to our fabulous guest, Mr. Chad Dye from Erie Shores Paranormal and MidWest Parafest. Chad, thanks for being on the show tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, let's talk a little bit about you for a minute. We've been talking about the event and the history of Erie Shores Paranormal, but I'm dying to know, because you've been doing this for a while now. What got you into this field?
Like a lot of people, I guess I started out watching the ghost hunting shows. I was actually more intrigued with UFO and alien contact stuff, but the ghost hunting shows came out, and I was somewhat intrigued. Never believed in ghosts or the boogeyman or anything like that. And then watching these shows and seeing some of the evidence they were coming up with just made me scratch my head and go, wow, can this really be real? Because I'm quite the skeptic. And then I met some people that were part of a team, and I said, can I come along? And it's been history since then. I've experienced all kinds of things I can't explain. I have a photo that has been looked into by photo analysis people that they can't explain. I've been touched. I've heard my name. I've gotten great EVPs. And it's just something, I don't know if we'll ever find all the answers until we get to where they are, but
Right.
It's something I'm pretty emphatic about.
Well, and that was going to be one of my questions. Do you think we'll find, the concrete methodology for communication? Do you think we'll find those answers within our lifetime?
I think, and I'll paraphrase, I think Tesla said it best when he said, when we stop looking to science for answers, we'll learn more than they've learned in a decade.
Right.
Because guys like Edison and Tesla and, Einstein, they all believed that energy cannot be created or destroyed. And, we just go somewhere else. And as paranormal investigators, we're trying to figure out where that energy goes. And how can an energy that doesn't have a mouth or a voice box, how can they communicate with us? How does this stuff happen?
Right.
How can I be touched on the shoulder from beyond? Is it interdimensional? Is it a time slip?
Yeah.
So many questions.
Yeah, and it really brings in, the interweaving between science and the metaphysical. When you start looking at, inner dimensions or, and things like that. And I am a huge fan of, Einstein and Tyson. Actually, I'm a big fan of Tyson. And my co-host on another show, Chris Carr, is a huge fan of Tesla. And so, for you to paraphrase Tesla right there, that's like, I've heard that line before. And but there is some truth to that. And, we really need to start thinking outside the box with this. But at the same time, it's my personal belief that, we need to, in order to be viewed upon as credible, we need to try to follow the scientific method as closely as possible, do our very best, to make it as scientific as we can in order to have it, accepted. Do you agree with that, or?
Well, I do to some degree because, I mean, we try and use scientific methods to prove or disprove something happening. You know,
Right.
I mean, every orb photo isn't, you know, your dead grandmother. You know,
Right.
it can be dust. You know, not every broken radio is going to capture a spirit voice. You know, we try and use scientific methods to prove or disprove this stuff. The problem is, in the science world, you have to be able to recreate the event to have it considered proven or disproven.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't do that. We have to be
Right.
at the right place at the right time.
Right.
I mean, you could go to one haunted location 100 times in a row and never get the same spirit voice, or you may get nothing, or you'll get a knock one day and the next time you won't. We just can't make this stuff happen.
Now, what are your thoughts on contributing factors such as lunar phase or geomagnetic activity or solar flares?
I am a complete dunce when it comes to that kind of stuff. But I do believe, you know, the moon and its gravitational pull or whatever lack of from our Earth, you know, has an effect on our tides. I mean, that's scientifically proven.
Mm-hmm.
So us as humans being 70+% water, wouldn't it have an effect on us? Talk to any EMT or police officer or firefighter,
Right.
they'll tell you, oh, it's full moon, it's going to be a crazy night. You know, I mean, that's not just coincidence. So I tend to believe, or I lean toward the belief that yes, maybe it can have an effect.
Yeah. And, those are, some of the theories that that my organization, we try to work with those theories, to see just how much they do or don't, factor in, when we do capture data that could lead toward, paranormal presence. And, whether it's extraterrestrials or cryptozoological or ghostology, if you will. Um, we try to include that, with our data, to see if there is a correlation, because a lot of people and a lot of investigators do believe that those factors, can play in, because, the lunar phase can have an impact on human behavior, on the living, on animals, so why wouldn't it impact, spectral behavior or extraterrestrial behavior or cryptozoological behavior? And the same thing, with solar flares, when there's a lot of solar flares, people tend to be a little crazier. And geomagnetic activity, animals, before, during, and after earthquakes and such, animal behavior changes. And so, for us, those are things, that we look into and try to see, is there in fact a correlation, or is it, strictly speculation?
Well, I think that's important too. I mean, as an investigator, we record all that information just in case maybe it had some effect. But when you look at it honestly, if it's affecting an animal who really acts off instinct, where us as humans, higher forms of mammals, we have free will and we're thinkers and we don't just react. If you really delve into it, those kinds of reactions to, say, solar flares or earthquakes, that's primal. And I think it's hard for somebody with our higher intelligence, no matter how stupid we are, it's hard to look at something like that in a primal sense.
Right.
And that's why, as researchers and investigators, that's important to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, do you do a lot of residential cases, or do you primarily do business locations, or do you do a combination of both, or does it just depend on who asks for your help?
Well, it does depend on who asks for our help. Typically, it's a private residence, but who doesn't like to go to the famous haunted location, and do, the public stuff. But yeah, our main focus is helping people regardless of the location. We have in the past investigated a cemetery because a child died of brain cancer when he was like 2 or 3 years old, and grandma visited the grave, 2 or 3 times a week, and she could swear she was being visited by the ghost of her grandchild. So we actually investigated the cemetery. So that was kind of weird for us. We try to stay typically in a business or a private residence kind of location.
And can I ask if you guys obtained any credible data at that cemetery?
We did not, but the medium that was with us was narrating all kinds of things that she was experiencing in the cemetery. But we didn't get any kind of direct response from this child. No video or photo proof. No audio proof.
Right. Now,
it's hit and miss,
Right. Well, just as with any location, it's going to be hit or miss. Do you guys do cemeteries frequently? Do you think that that cemeteries hold a high spectral value, if you will?
My personal opinion, and this is not the opinion of my team or anybody else.
Right.
I think a cemetery is for the living, to remember the dead. And anytime I go into a cemetery, whether it's for a funeral, a burial or whatnot, I try to be the most respectful. I try not to step on the actual gravesite. I try and walk in between where, I don't want to walk over somebody's grave.
Right.
And I think if somebody's hanging out in a graveyard, they're in the wrong place. They should be hanging out at the house they grew up in or hanging around their family members. I don't think if I passed on and became some kind of spirit that I'd hang out near my grave. How depressing would that be?
Right. Right. I know that, with my organization, we will occasionally go to a cemetery, simply for training purposes. Just because, it kind of gets you in that mindset, and it's really good, to practice, you're among the, the empty shells, if you will, but, you are among the dead and, dark, kind of creepy, and it kind of gets you in the right mindset. And it's good for training purposes. That's, the approach that I take with my organization. We don't,
I would never fault somebody for going to a cemetery because there's all kinds of, cemeteries across this country that claim to be haunted. Look at Bachelor's Grove. Look at that great photo that was taken there.
Yes.
And,
yes.
The cemetery with the children's playground way at the back of it. That's supposed to be haunted. I wouldn't mind going to those places, but, I think most of all, be respectful.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because it's not necessarily the departed that you're disrespecting, when you're misbehaving in a cemetery. It's the living. It's the people that, come there to remember their families, and if you're out there being verbally abusive or being destructive, or, walking on, somebody's loved one, it's offending the living people.
I agree.
And it could be offending the people who have departed. I don't know. I don't know how I would feel if somebody walked on my grave. I never gave it much thought. So, that's really cool that you guys were able to go and do that, though, and when you went there and utilized, the psychic medium that had the communication, were you able to put the grandmother's mind at ease and, kind of help her process